Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Amaazen Outdoors. This podcast is being presented by Upland Outfitters, home of the Relentless pants, man. Those things are awesome. I had them out this week, and I pretty much, since I started the partnership with Jason, have been wearing those pants out anytime over the summer here where I had to do any work at the farm or dog training. I've even had them on the boat a little bit. They are tough as nails. I have yet to see a pull 'em thread. I've been in some nasty briars. They really held up a lot better than I thought. I can't recommend them enough. Hunting season is around the corner. Make sure you use discount code Amaazen, and I believe Jason is still offering 20% off on the Relentless pants. So pick up a pair before hunting season is upon us, and you're out in the woods with a pair of ripped up pair of pants and sweating, unnecessarily, because Jason's pants and the Relentless pants are top notch and breathable, light. So you're going to want them this early season. Make sure you get them now. I also have a quick announcement. We've got another kind of temporary partnership with Chippewa River Custom Rods. Tom is going to be offering 10% off with discount code Amaazen 10. Amaazen 10, and it's all caps. If you decide to call him for a custom rod, just make sure you tell him that you heard about custom rods on Amaazen Outdoors Podcast, and he will make sure that you get hooked up with a discount. All that information for both sponsors and partners are going to be in the show notes, so please support the podcast and these great companies. They are really good partners for the podcast, and I would like to see our listeners support them as well. So look them up, Uplnd Outfitters and Chippewa River Custom Rods. Enjoy today's show. You are tuned in to Amaazen Outdoors. This is Brian Mays, your host. You are listening to episode 29, season 2. On today's episode, I sit down with the one and only Nick Larson of Project Upland Podcast. Nick's making a shift and changing the name of his podcast to the Birdshot Podcast, and being Midwesterners and a love for Wisconsin sharptails and good old rough grouse, Nick and I kind of have a great conversation talking about things here in Minnesota and Wisconsin and what's to come on his season and his relaunch of his podcast. Enjoy episode 29. Awesome. Well, I am super excited today to welcome Nick Larson to the Amaazen Outdoors Podcast. Nick, I've been listening to for a long time, kind of one of the guys that inspired me to start this endeavor. So welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Hey, thanks, man. It's an honor to be here, and it's been really fun to see a whole bunch of other podcasts popping up that share a similar interest and are, spreading the good word about upland birds and bird dogs and all the things that we love. And I know you've got some different flavors and stuff mixed into yours. I've been enjoying listening to it. And a little shout out for Wisconsin Sharptails too. That's kind of a little backyard topic of conversation for you and I, but it's cool to hear other people talking about it on podcasts.
Yeah, you definitely shined a light on it from a podcast perspective. You're the first one, and I don't know. It's just a soft spot, man. Those birds have such a challenge to live, and I felt like it needed more attention than they were getting. Yeah. And I'm glad to see them finally get on Instagram, man. I think they can really, hopefully, grow their group.
Yeah, it's really cool. That's a good example of, like, we've got a couple friends that are there and, involved in the board and stuff. And, all these causes and concerns, they existed, before the time of social media and podcasts and, but it's just that content channels and stuff were much more limited, and you had to rise to the top of, there was a lot more competition to get publicity when the channels were more limited. Well, now we have the complete opposite issue where we have anybody can publish something, and we have unlimited channels for content, and there's too much stuff. You can't pay attention to all of it, but the silver lining in that is that, Wisconsin Sharptails and some of these more nuanced topics, like even upland bird hunting, that was never the leader in it was very limited as far as like content channels, but now there's all kinds of stuff for us to kill time with.
There's a lot, and really kind of, like you said, shining the light, focusing in on them, and helping them promote their cause is really important in today, because there's so many different channels. And if you're not kind of taking place in at least some of those channels, you're losing out. And I know, being up at their board meeting and speaking with some of the board members, that it was just something that they really felt that they needed to do. And there was some old guard up there that God bless their hearts. I mean, they are the reason that there's still sharptails around up there.
Right.
But, they were part of that generation that really didn't want to take part in the digital world. I think they were still doing like actual snail mail newsletters up until this year. Yeah. So it's really nice to see. And I think, given all that, they're going to grow, and they're going to get more funds, and then, seeing some of the newer technology that they're using and implementing and studying these birds is super exciting, because I came out of the technology world. So I was involved in building battery systems for those. Holy cow, I think my wife made it home, and the short hairs are going nuts upstairs.
I can't hear them too much.
Good. But yeah, so it was a really small group, and I felt that they needed I wanted to donate some money to a cause that I felt that my dollars were going to go really far.
Sure.
And I'm a member of Pheasants Forever, Quail Forever, Rough Grouse Society, but they have all these big salaried positions and overhead, and the Sharptailed Grouse Society of Wisconsin, they don't have any of that. No. I felt that, my lifetime membership fee was going to go a long ways.
Yeah. No, it makes a big difference for a small organization. That's for sure. And to their credit, it's kind of funny that, they maybe didn't have an Instagram account, but they're at the leading edge of technology on birds, putting GPS trackers on birds, which is really cool. And now that they have an Instagram account, more people can hear about it. I will say that when I did the Wisconsin Sharptails episode a couple of years ago, I heard from a lot of people that really liked it. And, if you take a step back and consider an episode about Wisconsin Sharptailed Grouse on my, Upland Hunting podcast, you can't hunt these birds. They haven't had a season for years, and it's a really small, isolated pocket of birds that, isn't necessarily going to appeal to a nationwide audience. But I got a lot of good feedback on that episode. People were interested in it, and I think it's kind of like what you're saying. It's just to be able to allow some of these stories to surface and give people the choice. You don't have to listen to every episode, but it's there if you want it. And I know I heard from at least one person that I don't think he really had any idea about sharptails in Wisconsin, and he was telling me it was his favorite episode of the podcast ever. So just kind of cool to share that stuff.
Exactly. You never really know where the feedback's going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when, you get guys that are like, I didn't really even know that the sharptails existed in Wisconsin. I had a little bit of that myself.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'm raising my hand over here. Like I had no idea like where they were, what the situation was. And, I've learned a lot over the past few years just from getting to know really the resource professionals that are working for them, and now some members of the Wisconsin Sharptailed Grouse Society. And it's cool.
Yeah. I knew very little about them until I started digging in. And then thanks to Bob Hansen, who's the biologist, he hooked me up with it was May 3rd this year. I ran up to a viewing blind on a lec, and that was the first time.
Oh, did you get up to a blind?
That. Oh, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Life-changing experience.
I got to get there.
And I mean, it's honestly, I wrote I'm trying to get it published right now with a couple outdoor publications, but I wrote a whole write-up on it, on kind of how it changed my life. And it's really, truly the day I feel like I put the conservation badge on my bird vest.
Awesome.
It just, it's so unique. And to be able to be sitting amongst jack pines and have these birds fly in, and just put on their display and know that, these 8 males that are on this lek are probably some of the only 8 males within miles of here.
I know. Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting too, when I've had a chance now to go out west and kind of hunt the prairie, the short grass prairie, and hunt sharptails out there, which I don't want to say it's their more natural habitat, because we've had sharptails, sharptails are native to this part of the world, but it shines a light on how adaptable they are and the different kinds of terrain and habitat that they can use, because sharptail habitat here in Minnesota or Wisconsin looks a whole lot different than it does out in the Dakotas or Montana, as you know.
Oh yeah. And their food sources are different.
Yeah.
And so it's a much bigger challenge to kind of put it together, I think, up here to find birds. I've been out about a half a dozen times now since I it kind of cooled off a little bit.
Yep.
It was really hot this summer.
It was.
And I'm not as close to sharptail habitat as you are. So I got to drive a little bit, even from our place over in Wisconsin. And it really didn't lend itself to the travel for how much time I got to run the dogs. So I got out a couple times here in the last week, and I've been focusing on the southern part of
their range,
sharptail range. Yeah, just because it's the closest to me, and I can get up there and run them before it gets too hot. But you've been out too a little bit looking, haven't you? Up by you.
I have, yeah.
You run across any cubbies?
So interestingly, I've gone. I think this is my 4th year. I think 2018, 19, 20. Yeah, this is my 4th season trying to chase and train dogs on these late summer sharptails in some of the areas. So I've been learning the areas, and I would say I've been successful in that. I haven't had a very hard time finding birds in years past. Now this year I am 0 for 4. I've been joking with some of my friends, and Mike Amaazen, who's on the Wisconsin Sharptailed Grouse Society board. They've been out, and everybody seems to be able to get into some birds. But this year I did a couple runs in they were more exploratory, because that's one of the unique things about it is there's known habitat where people kind of go to find sharptails and where the leks are and stuff, but then there's little fragments of habitat scattered about. And I think you and Bob may have talked about this when you had him on the episode, but they're kind of other pieces of habitat that are sort of on the fringe of those core areas that are identified as possible habitat. And I went to a couple of those places this year, and I just, for whatever reason, the dogs and I haven't got into them, and I don't know. It's a small sample size. So I don't know what that necessarily says about the birds or anything, but we haven't had much luck finding them. So I'm waiting for next week when I head out to North Dakota. That's going to be, I think, the first sharptails I see this year.
Yeah, I have not found any myself.
Okay.
But again, like you, I've been kind of hitting that marginal fringe habitat because, again, my whole desire with this is to try to find birds in areas that the DNR doesn't currently know that they're there.
Right.
And give that data so that they can do something with it if it's relevant.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of been my mission. And I've been, more around that like Fish Lake wildlife management area south of Highway 70, which is very not currently being monitored for sharptails by the Wisconsin, by the DNR or the Sharptailed Grouse Society. So that was kind of my mission earlier in the year, was like, I got to find some sharptails south of Highway 70.
Yeah.
And I've struck out.
Yeah.
So,
and there is a desire to know that, that's that, as you know, Bob Hansen was, any data or information, data points that they could get, even if it's from, just a bird hunter running their dog and bump into some sharptails. That's all helpful right now as they're trying to kind of put this puzzle together of how to maintain sort of this, the habitat's going to be fragmented. You can't have one big contiguous patch of sharptail habitat. So they're really focusing in on this sort of stepping stone pattern of piece of habitat here. That. Exactly. Yeah. Trying to increase connectivity and stuff. And yeah, it's really cool. And, I think I probably share the same sentiment as you, as I'll do a lot of bird hunters, we get excited about this stuff. And so if we probably get that feeling like, hey, if, my dogs and I could share a little information with the resource professionals, the people doing the real serious work, we feel good about that, whether or not we're really making a difference or not, but we got our attitudes in the right spot.
Well, exactly. And the data's the data.
Yeah.
Like I mentioned earlier, whether or not it's relevant to what they're currently doing, it's still data. And at some point, hopefully it becomes relevant if it's not today.
Yeah.
And just to, A, kill a couple birds with one stone, and B, help out where you can.
Right. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. It's been a lot of fun. I actually, I don't know if I should say this publicly or not, but I think there's going to be a few board positions opening up at WSGS. So I'm considering
got your eye on one.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, it's just one of those things where I can go join and try to get involved with pheasants forever, but I don't feel I'm going to be able to make the same kind of impact I could if I worked with the Wisconsin Sharptailed Grouse Society. It's just being a smaller group, you get more impact, I think.
Sure. Yeah.
So you've got some interesting stuff coming up, and I want to get to that. But for some of my listeners that maybe tune in for other reasons than bird hunting, can you kind of give us a little bit of your background and kind of how did you start your podcast? Because you were like one of the first ones that took on the bird hunting topic.
Yeah, there were certainly fewer bird hunting podcasts when I started mine, which is the Project Upland Podcast as of today, although it's undergoing a change and maybe change by the time this episode airs. But to make a long story shorter, back in 2017, I was working for the Rough Grouse Society, and I had just transitioned into another job. I was kind of hopping back and forth really between sort of the conservation world and like my previous life was finance and accounting. And I was trying to figure out how I could get more involved in the world of upland hunting and upland birds. And, so I worked for the Rough Grouse Society and spent a couple of years working in that world and met a lot of people, and sort of, that's where I really started building my network. And I was a podcast fan and a podcast listener for quite a while, going back to probably 2009 or 10. I started listening to podcasts, and there was nothing in the hunting world back at that time. But then they slowly, there was one here and one there, and I always kind of had this thought in my head that I think I could host an upland bird hunting podcast. I've been grouse hunting pretty much my whole life since I was able to start, and just have always had an obsession, I guess would be the proper obsession, or addiction, I guess would be the proper way to put it. But I can't seem to get enough of it. And anyways, in 2017, I had gotten to know friend of mine, AJ DeRosa, who was started Project Upland at that time. And it was really, there was not much to it. It was a website, and he was making some films, and he just sort of called me up out of the blue one day and said, would you consider doing a podcast for me? And, everything I had thought about up until that point, I just didn't have really the kick in the butt to say, yeah, I'm going to go do this. Right. And so that phone call kind of was, and that was 2017. I started up the Project Upland Podcast and started interviewing everybody that I knew or could reach out to in the upland bird hunting and conservation world. And now I basically have just wrapped up 4 years of hosting that podcast. And just last Sunday, I recorded a podcast with Ann Jandrina of Northwind Mapping, which it's always a fun interview for me because I interviewed her the first year I started the podcast, and then I just sort of every year after that, right around the time grouse season would start, I would call up Ann and interview her, and we just kind of do a little season forecast and talk about what happened during the nesting and brooding season. And how
well, and they do some really unique things with their mapping
Yes.
too. I've listened to those episodes and I've been intrigued to try to dig in more, but I've got too much on my plate to spend that much time in front of a computer these days. So
yeah, it happens. And but anyways, I just like it was cool. While I was interviewing Ann, that was the 5th time she was on the show, and marking 4 years of doing my podcast. And so yeah, it's been, I mean, man, I can't tell you how much fun I've had doing it, the amount of, and you'll know this obviously, the amount of people that you get to meet and just the interaction you get to have with people that are listening and enjoying the shows and enjoying your guests and the conversations that you're having. Like, it's really a way to, it's kind of exactly what I wanted to do. I just wanted to sort of bring more of that into my life and just connect with more people that shared that similar passion. And man, the deeper I dive and the more I get into it, the more enjoyment and fun I get out of it. And I've met a lot of people along the way and got no plans to slow down. But that sort of brings us up to today, where I was doing the Project Upland Podcast and doing some work for Northwoods Collective, which is a marketing agency that is sort of the umbrella over Project Upland. And now I've always been an independent contractor, been self-employed for a few years, and I've recently, earlier this year, had an opportunity to start working with Upland Gun Company, which was started up by a friend of mine, Jerry Havel, who's the owner of Pine Ridge Grouse Camp. And I jumped at that opportunity because if for anybody that listens to my show, that I kind of have a thing for shotguns, and I've definitely got the double gun bug, and it was an opportunity that I was really excited about. So I did that. I accepted that opportunity. And then at that point, I kind of had to make a decision where I was sort of branching out on my own, and I wanted to be able to, my podcast, like I've got a lot of time and invested in it, and I wanted to make sure that I could take that podcast with me, and I wasn't going to take the Project Upland name. And so again, trying to make a long story short, I worked out a deal with the folks at Northwoods Collective to be able to sort of take the podcast that I had built and created, change the name, take that independent going forward. And I am very close to launching the new podcast, which the whole format and everything of the show isn't going to change a whole lot. It's just basically changing the name and allowing me to sort of take ownership as Nick Larson and just sort of take that podcast under my own wing and make sure I can take it with me wherever this path takes me, really.
Yeah, I think too, when you started, the kind of the back end side of things for podcasters really wasn't set up yet. Mm-hmm. It wasn't as developed as it is today.
Right.
And with kind of COVID and a lot of the dynamics that have changed things, the importance of kind of having you as your own kind of brand versus working for another organization is extremely important, because it gives you the liberty to do what you want, and then B, you can fund some stuff, some of the podcast if you own it.
Right.
It's hard to get into those affiliate programs or whatever it may be that you're trying to do from a advertising perspective. I'm got to imagine that you get, sponsorship and, other affiliates that are maybe pushed on you more than you going out and seeking those kind of companies you want to partner with. You know, you don't own the show, you don't have all the say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just bottom line.
Yeah.
So I can understand the need and desire to want to do that. And especially if you kind of parted ways for employment wise with those guys.
Yeah.
It makes things difficult.
Yep. Yep. And it was, you know, again, it was a very good sort of 4-year run. And, you know, I benefited from the Northwoods Collective sort of network of partners and the brands and stuff that they work with. And I'm not planning on, you know, ending any of those, you know, relationships. You know, I've met a lot of good people and I've made a lot of contacts myself and through Northwoods Collective. And so I think we've found a really good way to sort of transition and just, again, kind of allow me to carve out my little piece of what I've built and move that forward. And I've got a lot of ideas as far as like, you know, I don't know exactly what it's going to look like in 2, 3, 5 years, but I've got some visions for what I want to do. And, you know, there's the whole video world and YouTube, and there's stuff along those lines that I'm certainly interested in and trying to figure out, you know, is there a spot where I could actually add value in sharing content in that format? So there's just some stuff that I'm thinking about. And again, yeah, that was the main driver as far as wanting to just sort of make the transition and take the show independent and be able to kind of navigate these things as I figure out what I want to do.
Yeah. Again, having the liberty just to be able to think outside of the box that, you know, you've been put in per se.
Yeah.
Is so important. That was one of the things when I started this podcast was, you know, I don't want to be beholden to company brands and I want to be able to have the liberty to kind of cover a bunch of different topics, not just related to, you know, bird hunting.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of cross-pollinate some of the interest level with getting maybe somebody that has an interest in other outdoor activities into something new. And I just felt that, you know, there was definitely some paths where I could kind of maybe get more listeners right away and build a little bit better fan base right away, but it came at costs. And I felt that going independent and running this thing, and with today's technology, you don't have to be an expert.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that show is definitely in some of my first episodes, but as we're moving along, it constantly improves. And, you know, at some point you want to have that continuous improvement, and having an organization that kind of has the envelope that you're supposed to operate in, it limits that.
Yeah. I still cringe when I hear people tell me that they just found the podcast. They love it. They went all the way back to episode 1 and have started listening all the way through. I do not think I could bring myself to go back and listen to episodes 1 or 2, but maybe I should at some point just to see how far we've come. Cause I know that the show has definitely improved. And, you know, at the end of the day, I appreciate that, you know, the people that listen and stick with it, you know, they see that improvement too. And otherwise they wouldn't keep listening. So it's a good measure of progress.
Yeah, it is. I still have not come to bring myself to listen to episode 1 or 2 yet either. I don't really plan to. I kind of have a slightly different format too. I've wanted to do things as kind of like a season. And kind of started with the bird hunting season and run it all the way through my fishing season, which kind of is my reset for the year, and then kind of start all over again in the fall. So that was kind of my hope. And again, one of those things that, you know, you just, depending on what your situation is, if you're not in the driver's seat, it's not something you can affect the change that you want to see.
Yeah.
So
not to make this podcast all about podcasts, but it's, you know, it's a pretty new experiment. You know, the podcast world it's kind of exploding right now, and there's a lot of growth, and who knows what it's going to look like in 3, 4, 5 years from now. And that's again what I was getting at as far as like being able to sort of position yourself to you know, adapt and
to grow.
Yeah, grow and make moves as things move forward and develop. Because I mean, it's nobody could tell you what this world's going to look like in 3, 4 years. So
no, and that's one of the big reasons I jumped in. My previous background, I was in electronics manufacturing, and I was manufacturer's rep. So I had like 14 bosses, and then the guy I worked for, and that was too many bosses. But I saw a big change in that world happening where people from a sales perspective were not wanting to talk to sales at all. And then COVID hit, and you couldn't go in and shake hands anymore. And it became very apparent to me that if you're not building something where people can find value in you and find you, then your sales process is really just, hey, what can I find today? And that's not, shooting from the hip is never really a great strategy. So I felt that it was kind of time to make a change. And I was actually considering doing this podcast regarding my specific industry at the time. And
oh yeah,
I said, why?
Yeah.
Why not? Why would you talk about something outside of the solving people's problems and meeting new people and building relationships? The product itself and the industry itself was really irrelevant. Why not do it about something you actually really care about? And that's when kind of it all came to me on kind of a trip to Kansas that this is what I got to do.
Yeah.
And back we came, and off we went.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things too with podcasts and a lot of things in life in general. I think we all have great ideas, great plans. I mean, you're controlling the monkey in the mind is typically a tough deal sometimes.
Yeah.
It goes a mile a minute, and
yep.
Man, oh man, if you could get all those ideas written down on a whiteboard, one might be able to solve the equation in the head. But for me, I don't know, my life goes by way too fast, and I can't get half the thoughts out of my head. So I had to just kind of go and learn along the way and be willing to kind of have the cojones to try and fail. And if you fail, dust yourself off and get back up again. And, same with the hunting,
Absolutely.
Life's a lot of that way.
Yep.
And, so that was kind of just driving back from Kansas. I'm going, there's no reason to talk about electronics. Let's talk about bird hunting. Yeah. Let's talk about fishing. Let's talk about the Midwest, the things you love to do. And that really kind of, I know, and looking back in hindsight, had I done the podcast about
you would have burned out.
I just wouldn't have the passion behind my voice.
Yeah.
Bottom line, even from day one.
Yeah.
And probably wouldn't have gotten nearly as far and probably burned out. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. It's if the subject matter wasn't such that, my curiosity to dive deeper and deeper into this stuff that's the main driver. And that's what allows me to get on the phone or a video call with my guests and be excited about what they have to say. And, and then there's this whole snowball effect of then you get feedback from the listeners and the engagement. And once you find out, that was the magic moment for me. Once I found out that people actually enjoyed listening to the show and were learning stuff, then it's just like, that's just giving you a big push to keep on going and doing it more.
It's been that's been the most gratifying.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And even like I had one of my good buddies, he actually goes, yeah, I'm, listening to episode 7 or something like that. And he goes, and he texts me 2 days later. He goes, I actually went out and bought one of those pairs of pants you recommended. And I'm like, oh, that's just awesome. And that somebody took some action, regardless of whether or not it was, purchasing a pair of pants or supporting a sponsor or one of the, NGOs that I like to tell people to send their money to. It was the action that somebody was enjoying the podcast and that they went out and did something. I had another listener reach out to me too right away early in the show. And he's like, I really enjoyed episode 2 with Mark. And I went out and I gifted a membership to RGS to my dad.
Cool.
And I'm like, cool. That was like, you go to sleep and you just kind of have a really good feeling, even when you wake up the next day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a small thing that may never have happened without that episode. And yeah, it's cool.
And the other thing I really like about the podcast is that the content's always there.
Yeah.
You listen to the radio and you hit the pause button with a podcast, you jump back in the truck. It's right where you left off, but you listen to the radio, might hear what's going on the conversation, or might be listening to a song. You get back in the truck, it's not the same song, or the conversation has progressed to the point you don't even know what they're talking about anymore.
Right.
Yeah, that's and then you can always go back, and so those cool things, I think, from both from a knowledge base, educational perspective. I think it's really beneficial for podcasts and being able to have a platform for some of these smaller organizations to have a soapbox to stand on and get their opinions out there. So eventually somebody might be able to listen to it. And even if it's 3, 4, 5 years later, I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So again, it's about building that. I kind of, before I parted ways with my previous company, I told a few of the folks there that, we're going about this all wrong. We're knocking on doors. I said, we need to build the field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. That's how the dynamic is today. People don't want to be sold. They want to be educated about what they're buying, and they want to feel like they bought value or listening to, they want to find value.
Yeah.
And if you don't have something to offer them, your credibility and value proposition just isn't there in today's world, because it's just so fast paced. People don't have the time to develop relationships with companies or people a lot of times.
Yeah.
And it isn't until they take action out of that equation and that you really get into these relationship scenarios. And I think podcasting is kind of unique in that I was amazed when I left and I started podcasting and I was reaching out to people, what I would consider in my old industry as kind of like capture rate. So, hey, I contacted somebody and they're going to come on as a guest on the podcast, right? So that was a win. Well, in my old industry, it was cool if we got like 15%.
Right.
I'm batting like 80%.
Yeah.
Like, this is just awesome.
Yeah.
People want to chat and they want to talk about, themselves or their organization. So it's just a totally different dynamic than what I was used to, which has been a lot of fun kind of changing that dynamic at home. I know my wife's a lot happier than I'm happy.
Yeah, that's a good thing.
So you're launching the new podcast, but let's back up for a second.
Yeah.
So you were you born and raised in Duluth?
I was.
'Cause that's where you're out of, right?
Yep. I live in Duluth, Minnesota. I was born and raised here and have lived here my whole life, except for 5 years after college. I went to college here in Duluth, mainly because I was still so attached to the outdoors and my fishing and hunting and stuff. I just didn't want to leave. And then after that, I was kind of like, well, I think I could live here the rest of my life, but I probably should get out and see the world a little bit. So I, like a lot of Duluth kids, I went down to the Twin Cities and I worked in finance and lived in Minneapolis and really enjoyed it. But what I learned living down there was, again, how much I just valued the outdoor lifestyle, the access, and the opportunities that we have up here. And 5 years later, my wife and I moved back, and we've been back up here since 2014. So yeah, I grew up fishing the Lake Superior tributaries and chasing grouse with my mountain bike and a wrist rocket as soon as I knew what they were, and that's pretty much my upbringing around here.
Hey man, you're living in God's country. I'm not gonna lie. Duluth's always kind of been the gateway to the great north for me.
Yeah.
I grew up over in eastern Wisconsin, and we used to kind of head up to Rainy Lake area every summer.
Oh, yeah.
My dad did for years. He went to college down in Winona with owner's kids of Rainy Lake houseboat. So we had some connections up there, and he always had a tie and a love for the area. So it was always like when we got to Duluth, it was like finally, like we're getting into the big woods now.
Yeah.
We come up 53 in Wisconsin, and maybe you get up towards about 50 miles south of Duluth, and then the woods are really big woods.
Yep.
But it's still, south of Rice Lake, even where you get off at Trago, or you get off towards Hayward, it's still not like the woods you got up by you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So do you grouse hunt up the North Shore at all?
I have. Yep. I have plenty. I
got a question for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I know you hunt Wisconsin.
Yep.
Do you find that the grouse are easier to play with up on the North Shore than they are in Wisconsin?
I would say I've seen areas in Minnesota that, yeah, I do think you maybe see a little bit more of that kind of road bird.
The dumb bird.
Yeah. I'm always like, I can't call a rough grouse dumb, but I know.
I sure can't.
Yeah.
No way.
I know exactly what you're saying. So yeah. And like, maybe that's kind of helps the conversation. I started when I was young, I don't know, 9, 10, 11 years old. I remember a few like vivid moments from my very first rough grouse hunt. My dad, my uncle, we went up the North Shore, and we were hunting the Arrowhead of Minnesota, and we were driving forest roads, and I think my uncle had a Springer Spaniel. We did not have a dog because it was me and my other younger cousin and then our two dads. But what we did is what a lot of people do. You drive the forest roads and you get out on ATV trails and stuff, and you just walk trails. And I mean, you can definitely be successful as a grouse hunter doing that. That's what I did for the first like 10, 15 years of my grouse hunting, until I was able to actually get a bird dog later in life, because we didn't have bird dogs growing up. But I remember the first grouse I saw standing in the middle of the road. My dad and my uncle pointed it out, and they're like, that's what we're looking for. And I still think to this day, like, there's just something about seeing that bird standing in the big, beautiful North Woods. Like, it just, I don't know, man, it struck me in a weird way, and it's never left me. And ever since then, I've been kind of crazy about grouse. But so, yeah, I did a lot of hunting up in the Arrowhead, northern Minnesota, walking trails, doing that whole thing. And me hunting Wisconsin is much more recent. My family bought a cabin over there in 2016. And prior to that, I never would really cross the bridge, just because, why buy an out-of-state license? There's plenty of birds in Minnesota. But now I say that I pretty much hunt about 50-50, 50% Minnesota, 50% Wisconsin. I'll play the weather and the conditions a little bit. And
you got a nice spread there.
Yeah.
Because I can tell you right now, even my place is over, in Polk County. So I'm quite a bit further south than, where I think
Yeah.
you're up in like Douglas or Bayfield County area, which northern.
Yeah. Those are the
Wisconsin.
two most northern western counties in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yep. And I mean, that's really is, it's the nice thing about living where I live. I could go any direction from my house. I can go south from my house and get into grouse country. So yeah, if you're a grouse hunter, it's a good place to be, no doubt. And there's just a lot of, I can spread out like where I hunt, and I can distribute the amount of hunting I do in certain areas. And I've learned a ton, and as the mapping applications and everything have improved, like I've been able to more easily identify like where to go hunting. Like we have that advantage for sure. I mean, we have more information than,
too much.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure. Too much. But it's like, I hunt with a lot of people that have been grouse hunting for a lot longer than me. And, they didn't have GPS collars, and they didn't have maps that showed them forestry data. And it's like, I don't even know how you cut a dog loose without a GPS collar anymore. And it's, part of it is just, you get used to that technology, and it's hard to imagine going back. But boy, we've got some conveniences and some abilities at our fingertips that are, you can take advantage of them, but they can be a slippery slope from time to time.
Well, yeah, they can be a big time suck, and then there's a lot of data there, so it's hard to dock down to what is really truly relevant to put together a successful hunt.
Yep.
I've been using Onyx now for a couple of years, and they launched that crop layer crop layer data this year.
Yeah, crop layer this year. Yep.
Yeah, and by me, it's not all that accurate.
Really?
I found that what's a cornfield is sometimes a bean field, and I got to get them some feedback.
Well,
on that.
I do know that, and maybe you know this, but the crop data in Onyx is a year past. They can't get current information. So the idea is that if you know that it was corn in 2020, you should assume it's probably going to be something different this year. And so there's like a little bit of interpretation.
Is that what
there.
it is? Okay.
Yeah, yep.
Okay. I appreciate the clarity there, because that would make a lot more sense.
Yep.
On what I'm kind of seeing.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, so there's a prime example. data. You don't know what it is. And I'm kind of trying to figure it out. And, probably didn't have the time to read the instruction manual.
Yeah. Well, and I heard that straight from the horse's mouth from my buddy that works at Onyx. So, but they've been slowly kind of, he's been on some podcasts and sharing it and stuff. But if you didn't know that, that wouldn't be the first thing I would assume. I don't know the first thing about farming. I had no idea.
Yeah, and I do know enough about farming to be dangerous.
Sure.
And then you throw that information in there and it can really mess up what you're, especially an out-of-state hunter. I mean, let's say you're going out west and want to hunt Bob White and you're looking for Milo fields or millet, and it's not the same. And you're looking at all this data, and all of a sudden your planning just went out the window. So,
right.
Yeah, it too much data can be a bad slippery slope. And I give it to those old guys, man. They were some real men.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I was talking with a buddy last night about, the Lewis and Clark expedition, and it's just like the things that those guys went through. I mean, with no technology, with no maps really. And I mean, you talk about real men, and then we whine and cry if the weather's wrong.
I know. Yeah. It's tough. Those are the kinds of things that, I realize like the luxury and the conveniences that I have, but it's still that when I'm out in a piece of grouse cover, like I love to just sort of lose myself in the moment and just be like, man, imagine what this place was like when there were no roads. There was nothing here. Like if you were just traversing this country and, obviously it's like I'm a long way from being able to do that, but I fancy that stuff in my mind and I like to think about it. And I think a lot of us do. Like that's sort of what we appreciate about being out there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. And the conveniences are nice. Don't get me wrong. I won't pass
we live with them. Yeah.
Conveniences if they're available, but, yeah, it's definitely when I'm walking those trails or even driving, out to a destination to hunt, and it's just row crop after row crop. And, you just, my mind wanders, how many birds were out here before, the modern farm equipment got to it.
Yeah.
And nothing against farmers. I mean, they feed all of us. Our lives won't have the conveniences if we don't have them. But the would-haves and the stories of the yesteryears definitely wander to my mind when I don't have a bunch of distractions.
Yeah, right.
So what are you doing this fall? You mentioned you're going out sharptail hunting. You get to grouse hunt probably every day of the week if you got time.
Wow, I would love to say that I do. I get out quite a bit, but certainly not every day. This fall is going to be a little interesting. My wife and we just welcomed our second son into the world last week, so that's
congratulations.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thank you very much. We're very excited, and everybody's happy and healthy, and we're all at home, so we're feeling really good about that. And as excited.
How old's your other one?
My first son, he's Hunter. He's 3.5. He's 3.5, and just got a little brother named Jack last week. And like, as excited as I am for fall, I couldn't be more excited to have a little happy, healthy family expanding here, and we're pretty pumped about that.
I'm in the same boat. I just I didn't go through and don't have the responsibilities of carrying around the baby. My brother had his second son actually.
Oh, cool.
This week. So
awesome.
Yeah, the other one's Jesus, Archer's going to be 2. Yeah, so young family. I definitely understand the vibes you're going through.
You just sent one to college, didn't you? Am I remembering that right?
What was that?
Didn't you just send one to college? One of your kids?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I'm a very, very young empty nester.
Okay.
Almost. My wife's a couple years older than me, and had two kids from a previous marriage.
Okay.
So my stepkids are my kids, and we just got done. It's 24. So it's very, very strange. Charles and I, there's 16-year difference.
Okay.
Between us.
Yep.
And mom's not, like 20 years older than me. She's 6 years older than me. So she had her son right out of high school, And then a couple years later had a daughter. So my daughter's 18 and getting ready to leave the nest. And that's very, very frightening for me. So
yeah, I got all that to look forward to, man. I'm just,
at least you got boys, with boys, there's only one thing you have to worry about. With girls, it's everybody else's thing you got to worry about.
That's what people tell me. Yeah.
Yeah. But and then, it's a much easier transition for boys to get into the things that their fathers like to do. My daughter, my son, he deer hunted with me, and if I can get him to give up some of his hobbies on the weekend, he'll come out and chase birds with me.
Sure.
My daughter it's not her thing, and I'm not the type to push it or force it on them. It's there. You can take it or leave it. It'll always be there for you, but I'm not gonna expect you to live the way I live.
Sure.
It's just not a realistic expectation. So, yeah, she started to come around. I mean, she definitely enjoys watching the dogs work, but the shotgun in her hand hasn't come yet.
Yeah.
It will.
There's time. Yeah.
But yeah, no, I understand having a young family too. The opportunities to hunt are not there as much as one would like.
Yeah. And that's, it circles back to, living where I live, and, I can get out in the afternoon, I can be hunting in 20 minutes and I can be back for dinner and bedtime and all that stuff. So I will be, you did mention I'm planning on going out to North Dakota next week. I kind of plan that one every year since I started going out there a few years ago, and love to get out to the prairie in the early season when the woods are thick back here. Sometimes I go before grouse season is even open here. We're going to be out there for opener this year, but as you know, I will go if I'm here and it's opener, I'm going hunting, but the conditions aren't always the best early season. So I'm really excited to get out there and stretch my legs, watch the dogs run in the short grass and chase some sharptails. And then I will be coming back here and pretty much have, my sole focus will be taking care of the family and getting out in the woods as much as I can, which, I can get out on weekdays and, really probably any afternoon I can get out. I'll be trying to go for an hour or two. The dog's got to get exercise anyways. And that's kind of how I've set things up for myself. So we'll be hopefully getting plenty of rough grouse hunting in, and then maybe later in the season, maybe a pheasant trip or something. I've got some buddies that we're talking about, maybe even like a late December, January trip, but we'll see. I'm kind of playing it all by ear, and I'm trying to keep my calendar pretty flexible just to make sure everything is all good at the home front.
You ever been down to Kansas?
I haven't. That's one that's kind of on my list. And that's a candidate for perhaps that later season trip this year. I'd like to get down there because I haven't hunted bobwhite quail yet. I've yet to hunt wild quail, and so that's kind of, it's going to change. Yeah. I've heard,
now I understand why you maybe haven't done it yet. Cause
well, and I was for a long time before I had bird dogs living here, I was a one-dimensional hunter. I would go walk trails and roads and hunt for grouse. I wasn't hunting grouse and woodcock or anything. It was just, I was a grouse hunter. It was like a very one-dimensional. I was super passionate about it. And as soon as I got my driver's license, there was like no holding me back. Like I was grouse hunting as much as possible. But when I got my bird dog, my first one, I've got two now. I got my first one in 2014. Then it sort of started this gradual process of like, okay, now now I'm hunting grouse and woodcocks. My dogs are pointing woodcock everywhere. Like I didn't even know there was woodcock in the woods. Like I knew what they were a little bit. I shot a couple in high school, but I had no idea how many there were until I got dogs of my own and started hunting more over bird dogs. But
I kind of had a similar experience.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do.
That's how I started grouse hunting as well. The first grouse I ever shot wasn't even on the wing. Oh, and I didn't even really know it was that.
And this is one of those things, like you get into upland hunting and there's various opinions on shooting birds and on the ground and stuff. But if you grow up in this part of the world, it's pretty normal. And I didn't even know there was another way to do it. And really looking back, I shot a lot of grouse on a log on the side of a trail in a tree, and seeing what I see now, shooting birds over my dogs on the wing, like the one thing that I didn't do when I was younger is lose grouse. Like I didn't cripple them because they're stationary. You know, it's not that hard to shoot a stationary grouse. And seeing what I've seen now with shooting birds on the wings, like I would have lost a lot more birds shooting them without dogs back then, I think.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'll be honest. My question about the whole grouse difference between, the dumb grouse in Minnesota that some people I hear talk about.
Yeah.
It's typically guys like that I get those questions from are guys that don't hunt with dogs, and they're just trail walking guys. And again, more power to them. I couldn't do it today. There's just no way that I would be able to go grouse hunting without my dog, because it's just it's the equation.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist for me without it.
Yeah.
It's normally guys that are kind of doing the traditional, the way I grew up, first number of years grouse hunting.
Yep.
Just walking trails with no dog.
Yep.
That's where I kind of tend to find guys that have that opinion that the birds are just more flighty in Wisconsin than they are in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I learned from an old guy who what he would do is he'd and this is kind of funny, walk 10 yards and he'd stop.
Mm-hmm.
Walk 10 yards and stop.
Yep.
And I remember as a kid hunting that way, and I was amazed when you stop for a couple seconds, those grouse, they'd be 10, 15 yards from you and they'd start moving again.
Yep.
And it's really, truly amazing how much their native or natural kind of camouflage really works.
Oh yeah.
And I can see where guys have that impression up north, because, there's just less people than you see in Wisconsin typically. And, I don't know. I don't find the grouse to be any more difficult or easy really wherever I go. It's the dog work that I think makes the challenge a little bit more difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
I think
the dog is a uncontrollable element to a certain degree, and they apply pressure on that bird, and, the birds act in a much different way. They don't tend to hold up and freeze and use that natural camouflage if there isn't a dog.
Yeah. And I think that's something like, and a lot of times, like, again, if you talk to a non-hunter, like a lot of times they see a grouse when they're in the car. And I think there's something like a grouse just they don't behave the same when they see a vehicle like rolling down the road, whether it's an ATV or a car. That's a lot of times where they will just, stand there. And so then you drive up and you're like, well, that's kind of a dumb bird. It didn't even move, just scurried off into the woods. But as soon as, like, if you stop the car and you get out, like, not that you can't walk up and shoot one, but as soon as you start sort of moving your legs or put a dog on the ground, like, I just think they register that as like a predator in a hurry, and they're gonna behave a lot differently.
Yeah, I think that you've kind of hit the nail on the head. I think their natural predation in the woods is part of it is definitely foxes and coyotes and these other four-legged kind of canine creatures.
Yeah,
and it's a threat to them. And humans, we only actually hunt them for such a short period of time. I don't know that they associate as big of a threat as a canine. Yeah. Yeah. I think they feel they can hide from us.
Yeah.
They can't hide from a canine.
They will absolutely. Yeah. They will use that sort of statue standstill. And I know, like, it's one thing all those years hunting without a dog. I mean, I definitely learned some things about grouse, and I was like never really patient enough to like really stop and pause all the time, but I would walk as slow as I could, and really the thinking there is just the slower you can go, the better. And like, I was always trying to make the grouse make the first move, right? Because they're so hard to see. Yep. So if the first time you see a grouse, he's pounding his wings and taking off, like, good luck. You're behind the eight ball at that point. Which, that's what happened. That's what all my hunting is now, pretty much. But I was always scanning, trying to spot him on the ground. And if you're walking slow enough and you can get him to start peeping or taking a couple steps, that's the grouse making the first move. And then as the hunter, you kind of just, you fall in after that. But Yeah, I learned a lot about grouse during those years, but my dogs have taught me a lot more about the habitat and cover and birds in the years since than I learned back then.
I agree. And I enjoy the hunting more. It's
very much so. Yeah.
You get to see the dog and see their enjoyment. And for me, it really doesn't matter so much about the birds as, it used to be all about the bird. And now it's, birds are good and that's why we go hunting, but I can still have a good day just running the dogs.
Yeah. Yeah. I like exploring. For me, don't get me wrong. Like you, I love wing shooting. I love shooting grouse. I love eating them, bringing them home, but I'm more driven by just sort of like finding the places that they live, exploring that cover, running my dogs through there, and finding and flushing birds is sort of that is how I'm like measuring my day. Like if I'm finding cover that holds birds, like I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. And sure, it all comes together and I get a nice point and take a bird on the wing. I mean, that's kind of the pinnacle, but I just enjoy trying to make that happen.
Yeah. If you look at I carry around a little book during the season that after every walk, I tally things up. The column 1 is bird contacts.
Yeah.
Tally 2 is how many shots, and tally 3 is how many taken.
Yeah.
And that shows the importance level to me. I mean, it truly is. I gauge my day on how many birds do we move.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm a fairly horrible wing shot some days, and some days I'm great.
Yeah. We have our moments.
And it ebbs and flows. Those coveys of quail really got me flustered the first few times. Flock shooting, man, and not a good thing. But it's about bird contacts, and I think you have to put it that way, because if you don't, I think you'll get frustrated, and you might not continue to explore. And back to your point about exploring, and that's why I gravitated really towards wing shooting over the last few years, moreover than some of the traditional things I did, like deer hunting.
Yeah.
I deer hunt every year, and I got 200 acre farm I lease, but I'm hunting the same spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the woods changes, but it doesn't change as fast as if I got in the truck and drove down to the next piece of property.
Right. Yeah.
And that constant desire to seek out new covers and really I love the landscape. The beauty about Wisconsin and Minnesota is if you don't like where you are, you can drive usually less than an hour and you're in a completely kind of different landscape.
Yeah, that's very true.
Unless you get up by you further north, it's all fairly
pretty much big woods. Yeah.
But by me, I'm down in farm country one way. I'm in Driftless in another hour. I'm out in the prairie, west of the cities, and just in another hour. So the versatility of the landscape and what you do with dogs and being able to chase a number of different species and see all kinds of different places, it has been kind of the pinnacle for me for hunting and the focus and really the most enjoyment, because I also share that too typically with other people.
Yeah.
And I'm not out all the time by myself, and very rarely do I plan a trip by myself. So I enjoy the camaraderie that bird hunting brings as well, and seeing all the different dogs and the stories, and it's just you get all kinds of different walks of life, and I really like that. And people be definitely a little more friendly than your average deer hunter is.
Yeah.
So, what can you started carrying around a GoPro the last couple years, right? Or was it just last season?
It was just last season. I had a GoPro Hero 4 that I got in 2015 or 16, and I brought it out, and actually, oddly enough, one of the first, it might have been the first bird of my first dog's Hartley second season. It was some kind of first bird. I don't think it was the first bird I ever killed over him, but I was wearing that thing, anyways, he went on point and I shot a woodcock, and it was a real thick cover. You couldn't really see him. And I had that on film. But the thing about that was at that time, the GoPro had to be in a case and there was no motion stabilization. And like editing was just a nightmare for me personally. Like, it's not really my thing. I like trying technology, but I'm always trying to find the balance of, can I use this without it being too invasive or too labor intensive, right? And so, long story short, that wasn't working for me. Well, now I'd realized late last season, the GoPros had motion stabilization and they had a couple of new features that really intrigued me. And we were blessed with really good late season weather, and I was hunting grouse all the way, like, a lot in December last year, and that was important.
Same.
Well, what was that?
I said same here.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was one of those years that you were really kicking yourself for, at least in Wisconsin, for not sticking up for that January season.
Oh, right. Yeah. And we did, by the end of it, we did get some snow, so January wouldn't have been perfect, but yeah, no, I hear you. And maybe
not up by you, but down by us, we did get some snow, but it was still
wasn't much. Yeah.
Wasn't it that first, maybe it was it melted. There was a good week and a half in January. I was like, son of a gun, this is the second year in a row now.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
it gets kind of boring for a bird hunter up here in January.
I know. Yeah, it does. I'm not much of an ice fisherman. You're more of a fisherman than I am, but I've got fishing roots and I love it. But anyways, my season was interesting last year because my older dog was 6, kind of right in the prime of his career. Well, he had this nagging injury that ultimately turned out to be a torn cruciate ligament, and that happened right away in the season in September when I was in North Dakota. So I lost my older dog for the season. He was out, and I had a puppy at that time. So, I was thinking, all right, I got my older dog, we'll work the puppy in. Well, unintentionally, the puppy became the center of the universe, and she was very young at the beginning of the season. She was 3-4 months old, so we took it very slow, and I'm lucky enough to have enough friends with dogs and stuff that, I would run the puppy for a little bit every day, but hunt with other people. And I did a lot of hunting with the puppy. We're just, I remember back late September and early October, we were just going for little walks. I'd go to a gated forest road and we'd walk down the road, and I was hoping to bump into some birds, but she wasn't doing a whole lot. But that quickly changed. We kept working at it, and I don't know that I could have had a better first season for a puppy, just with it going so late and the conditions being so good into December. I mean, by that time she was really hitting her stride, and she was pointing birds, finding birds. I mean, she did things that I never thought I would see in her first year. And I remember one day we went out and we just had a really awesome hunt, and she had some work on, there was one trio of, it ended up being 3 grouse, and like the amount of times that she pointed and relocated these birds and eventually worked them to a point where I could circle and cut these birds off and shoot. And I shot at these birds. I cut them off at this little cut in a ravine, and they flushed into the open. Like, I saw them on the ground. It was this big long thing, and they flushed, and I was shooting downhill, and I missed with both barrels. I was so disappointed. Like, I did not reward her, because it was just incredible dog work from this puppy. And we ended up putting a couple birds in the bag that day, despite my miserable shooting. But I went out like either that night or the next morning and bought a GoPro, because I was like, I need that on camera. It was just, that was too cool. And so then I got the GoPro, started using it, and I am now to the point where, they've come far enough with the motion stabilization and the ease of operation that I've made some tweaks to my setup this year, but like, I'm really excited to be running that thing pretty much every time I'm out.
What kind of GoPro which one?
So I have the Hero 9, and
okay.
I have the Hero 9, and that was one of the best features that they put in there for me was this feature called Hindsight, where you don't have to be always recording anymore, because that was the thing, to capture grouse hunting action, you got to be always on. And then when you get home, you got 4 hours of footage with a lot of dead air, right? And I never wanted to go back and weed through that. That just wasn't for me. So with hindsight, the camera functions like it's always rolling, but it's constantly recording and dumping 30 seconds of footage. So the way that it worked for me is I would wait until something actually happened. Like, let's say dog goes on point, I walk in, flush a grouse, shoot it, miss it, hit it, whatever. You hit the button after the dust settles a little bit, and as long as you do it within 30 seconds, you then captured the previous 30 seconds. And I was able to get everything I wanted that way. And then when I get home, all I have to do is sort through a few clips of only action. Like I wasn't cutting out any dead air or anything. And that made a big difference for me, because then I didn't have to invest a ton of time in like looking through footage and editing stuff. I could just see the stuff I wanted to see.
I'm going to have to look at that, because I have a Hero 7.
Yes.
And I, like you, editing still is not a fun, even audio editing. It's not the part of the podcast I enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I sure enjoy it a lot more after I see it uploaded. But the Hero 7's great from an image standpoint and stabilization. But I pretty much run it on all the time to catch what I want. Yep. And it is, I literally dumped like 128 gig memory chip onto my external hard drive the other day. I think it took an hour.
Yeah.
And now I have, if I want to go and create some videos out of that, I have to go through all of that.
Yep.
And it's just not desirable. And I know that there's not a lot in there from, I was up at near the Barrens area, kind of, well, it's a popular one, Namakagon Barrens.
Yeah.
And I was up there looking for some sharptails the other day, and I video recorded all of that. And we didn't, it a couple birdie moments, but nothing, no contacts.
Yep.
And it's like, some of that might be great B-roll footage another day for a later date.
Yep.
But there's nothing in there to edit. And it's just, So having that hindsight sounds really, really interesting. I might have to look at that.
And it wasn't perfect. I'm hoping they keep the feature and they continue to improve it. There was only one time that I can think of where it totally glitched on me. At least I think, like sometimes in the heat of the moment, you never know, I may have screwed up, but it was the last grouse of the season that I killed. And my dog Rose went on, with a GoPro, it was as perfect as it gets. She went on point right in front of me. We were into a couple birds, and then we were sort of moving out of this area. And I don't know if it was a reflush or it was a different bird, but she slammed on point right in front of me. I was looking at her when she went on point, and she hit point so close to me that, immediately my eyes are on the ground because I'm looking for a bird, because it just, the intensity was there. And sure enough, I spotted the grouse right there, 5 yards in front of her. And about the time I spotted it, the bird took off straight away from me. I raised the gun, killed it. I reached up, hit the camera button because I was used to the process by now. And I can't tell you how excited I was to get home and rewatch that, to see my dog hit point and the grouse take off and go down. It missed the grouse flush. I started again, I don't know if it was operator error or if the hindsight glitched. I kind of think the hindsight glitched on me, but for the most part, it worked really, really well, and it made the GoPro a viable thing. And I don't know. I've shared some of the videos on my Instagram account, and I'm kind of debating on how much I want to be sharing just the little highlight reel. It's kind of like, I think that stuff is cool, and I think people appreciate it, but then there's so much more that goes into bird hunting and stuff. Like, I don't know that I want to just post a bunch of kill shots, I don't know how to think about that really. And I think we're going to start seeing more people run these GoPros out in the woods, and like, you're going to start seeing more of it, but I'm not really sure what I want to be sharing. But for me personally, to capture the dog work, I'm going to be more liberal with pressing the button this year, because I really want to capture this dog work. And I mean, to be able to go back and watch some of that and relive some of those memories, just for my own personal hunting journal, that's what I ultimately want to capture, and I'll be sharing some of it too, but I'm just not sure how much of it.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going with all of that, because I was kind of curious if people might be able to catch a few more videos out there from you, or if because just being able to go back from a educational standpoint and re-perceive what you saw, because I can guarantee you're going to notice things that you didn't catch while you were there in the heat of the moment.
Yes, that was one that. Yes, like we get such tunnel vision, like, and you have to have that singular focus when you're trying to shoot birds on the wing, that kind of thing. There were a number of things that I picked up reviewing the clips, which again, it all adds to like the affirmation of how much I'm valuing using the GoPro, and it is worth it for me. But there was this one, and I posted this video on my Instagram account actually, where perfect dog work, Rose went on point. This was the first day I was running the GoPro, actually. She goes on point. I walk in, and it's this like really nice setup. I saw the grouse on the ground right before it took off. The cover wasn't that thick, and the grouse took off, and it was like about as open of a grouse shot as you're going to get. There were a few trees in the way, and I remember I felt like I had all the time in the world to just kind of casually mount my gun, and I thought I timed my shot perfectly as this grouse was going behind this aspen tree. And in the heat of the moment, I thought I just bang, bang, missed him twice. The second shot was kind of worthless because I think I explained this in my post when I put it up, that I was so confident I was going to hit this bird on the first shot, which, it's kind of a rare thing to actually think you're going to drop a grouse, but that's how open it was. And that's how good of an opportunity it was. And it's late in the season, and I was kind of like, I was dialed in sort of at the top of my game. And anyways, this grouse kept flying. And when I got back, I realized that I shot a little bit too early, and I could see I hit the tree. And I don't know if it was right on the edge. I don't know if it sucked up the whole pattern, but I jumped the gun, I guess, pun intended. And I hit a tree, which is a very, very common thing. If you spend any time shooting at grouse in the woods, you just kind of got to accept it. But that was something I picked up by watching the GoPro afterwards. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen some video too of guys out like Sharpie hunting and stuff like that, and they've actually noticed, well, we did drop an extra bird, and stuff like that, and just having some of that knowledge, that hindsight that you can apply then on the next outing, I think is important to drive and continually improve your hunting experience.
Yeah, and I know that, like, again, some people would be like, they would never even be interested in running a camera on their head. And, I 100% understand that. For me, I like technology. I like gear. And like I kind of mentioned earlier, like I'm always kind of experimenting. I'm not afraid to try something and see if I can get away with it without it, ruining the experience for me. So I kind of enjoy tinkering with that. And, like you said, there's some things that I'm excited to run it out in North Dakota next week, because I really want to capture some of the dog work and some of the points where you can really see the dog, rising up on this little crest of a knob and hitting point. Like to be able to capture some of those memories of your own dogs, and whether you just go back and watch them when it's 40 below outside, I mean, that's worth it to me.
Yeah, and then you got young kids too, so you can share those memories with the kids later on. Yeah. So yeah, I understand. It's kind of some of the geeky part of the hunting technology. I found the dog stats on my Garmin Alpha that I had bought off my dog trainer just because it was better than what I had, and I was going to 2 dogs, and that was really amazing to me to kind of track, because I was always kind of going, well, this. I got 2 short hairs, and Rebel is an older dog. She's about the same age as your dog Hartley.
Yeah.
And then Luna, she's 3, and they're different size. They weigh damn near the same weight, but I got one that's got longer legs and a little skinnier and sleeker, and then a little more boxy is the little one. And the little one's just got just this huge, immense prey drive that is it's too much to a certain degree with a house dog. I can see how some of these like pointers and that are pretty wily, and I can see where people get the impression that short hairs can be a little hard to handle sometimes.
Yeah.
But I was always, she's always gassing out on me, and I'm got these dogs pretty well worked. They're top athletes. So kind of way I look at it. And it wasn't until I started really paying attention to the stats. I mean, she was running a mile, 2 miles extra on some of these just training walks that we were doing. And, it made a lot more sense to me, and it really kind of changed the way I was running her, because she's such a hard running dog. I had to kind of, not do all these big long escapades.
Sure.
She's got a, time limit that I kind of have to run her at to keep her going for a couple days if I'm out on a big trip. So
yeah,
it's just different kind of perception, and the technology works if you understand how to use it.
Yeah.
And then back, to the data thing, it's kind of what's relative. So
yeah,
the GoPro and some of these other technologies, they can be great tools, but they do take up time. And
yeah,
I can completely understand and almost to a certain degree want to simplify things, but then there's all these comforts and data that I do use and have had more success since I've started using it. So it's a balance.
Yeah. I like having the choices and the opportunities, and that's what's always kind of interests me about new technology and stuff. So that's why I dabble with it, but everybody has the opportunity to kind of make that decision for themselves. What do you value? What do you want to mess with? And what do you want to say, forget about? I enjoy having the choice.
I do too. So with the podcast, are you completely changing the name? So your subscribers and all that stuff, are they going to have to resubscribe to your new podcast?
So the idea is no, they won't have to.
Okay.
I'm still figuring things out on my end, but as far as I understand, I will be, if folks are subscribed to the Project Upland podcast, as soon as I make the switch to, which I didn't say this earlier, but the Birdshot Podcast is going to be the name of the new show. They will just overnight, when I make that change, folks that are subscribed will just see the artwork and the title and everything change, and they shouldn't lose track of me. But I will, that will be announced and detailed on my podcast and stuff, but it should be pretty seamless for folks.
Rock on. Yeah, that was one thing I wanted to make sure, because I listen, I enjoy, and want to make sure that I don't have to resubscribe or make sure it's clear for people, at least here, that if they are currently subscribed, that they don't have to resubscribe, or if you're not, you should check out the Birdshot Podcast.
Yeah. Go looking for it. Yeah, I wish we could, I can't say definitively at this point if it will be changed when people are looking, but if you, go Google or look up the Birdshot Podcast. And if you don't see that, look up the Project Upland Podcast, and it'll still be under that for a short time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Are you going to have a website and everything?
I will have a website. Yep. I've already got birdshotpodcast.com. I guess you could try going there. I don't know if it'll be up yet, but the goal is that it will be. So if folks are listening to this, you can go to birdshotpodcast.com. You can email me at nick@birdshotpodcast.com. The whole shebang. I'm going to have everything there, and I'm going to use that to, I used to do some blogging and do some other stuff. So I'm going to that's going to be sort of my centralized location for the stuff that I'm working on and doing. So if folks want to hear more about grouse hunting and upland hunting and from my perspective and the people that I talk to, that's where you can find it. birdshotpodcast.com.
Right on, man. I'll definitely have to check it out. You'll have to let me know when it's live.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to include all that information in the show notes and stuff too.
Appreciate it.
Anything else we didn't cover that you wanted to?
Not really, man. I'm excited.
I could chat with you about just about anything.
I know.
Yeah,
we could continue. Yeah, I'm excited for hunting season. If folks didn't pick up on our shared passion for grouse hunting, this time of year, this is it. Especially with the bird dogs now too. I love having them all year round, and we go to the cabin and we're at the lake and doing all that stuff. But I've been out running in the woods. We've been getting on grouse. I don't get too crazy as far as like going and trying to hit all my hunting spots early. I just run. We do our exercise runs, but I kind of do it strategically. And I've got some areas around here that I can go and have an enjoyable walk in the woods, and the dogs might find a grouse. And I almost kind of like that they're not like getting into grouse all the time, but it's like one here, one there. We've flushed some broods. The dogs have found some. I'm relatively optimistic. I think the nesting and brooding conditions were good. It was obviously very hot this summer, as you alluded to. It was quite dry. I don't think we had very much cool, damp, wet, rainy weather in June, which is important for chicks. I'm not sure how the dry conditions are going to affect. I think that's kind of the X factor for a lot of folks. I do think I interviewed Ann Jandernaw last week, and that episode will be coming out on my podcast next week, right around the time of opener, but so you can check it out. But she definitely had things to say about, you're going to want to pay attention to where the moisture is this year. I don't know if you guys got any rain last week, but we got a bunch of rain, like some decent rain in the last week. And I mean, it is sucked up immediately. Like it's so dry around here that you're going to want to pay attention to where are the cool, damp, moist areas in your grouse covers. And, I would make a point to check those out. And if you're in high, dry, super crunchy stuff, try to get lower, try to get in the shade. If you're not finding birds there, I should say. But I'm excited because I think conditions are such that there's a possibility of a good hatch this year. So
I will confer with a little bit of that. I was actually supposed to talk with Wisconsin's Upland birdie ecologist this morning.
Oh, okay.
Actually yesterday, and I had some technical difficulties, and then I triple booked myself this morning because yeah. One of those things where, if I don't have a client guiding for the day, it's just you try to get as much done as you can. It's so hard to run when I'm out on the boat or in the woods, I can't work on computer stuff.
Correct.
or communications period. And it just all kind of goes to the wayside, as well as home life and everything else. So, and it's just kind of a whole day that's dedicated away. And so when I do get mornings at home, I get kind of busy. Yeah. and then I didn't manage my calendar very good this week, but I can confer that water and moisture is going to be a very big key for the season. Yeah. It's even down by me. I'm kind of on marginal cover, right? I would say in my close proximity, it's marginal cover. It's kind of that pheasant grouse crossover.
Yeah, the mixed territory. Yeah,
the mixed territory, and both pheasants and grouse have been a little hard to come by over there. In part of that is just due to I'm exploring. I try not to walk a lot of the stuff that I'm going to hunt in the fall.
Sure,
because I want to have more spots to hunt in the fall. And so I do explore a lot of very, very marginal habitat and cover this time of year. And two, the woods are so thick, man. It's a really tough thing to go walk on a aspen cut.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times, we're hitting marginal cover, and everything that we've had contact with has been in close proximity to water. And like you said, we had rain and it got sucked up right away. I will say we're not doing as bad as drought conditions. I would say east of the Mississippi and St. Croix are better in Wisconsin.
Yep. If you look at the drought
Minnesota
map, like as you move into Wisconsin, it's like a lot of it's classified as just like not even abnormally dry or whatever. It's better the further east you go.
Yeah. So, with that being said, they were last year, Wisconsin didn't do any grouse surveying, right, because of COVID. So they did have decent surveys this year in the springtime. And I was just kind of, was hoping to have an update for people with, relation to what the DNR has seen since then. Yeah. But, they don't do a lot of post hatch data
Right,
anyways.
those brood,
So
yeah, yep.
yeah, it's kind of irrelevant, but conditional wise, it's always interesting to get their take on what they think might happen.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to have a good season. We had good numbers last year, better I think improving than the last few years.
Yep.
And with, our habitat, we didn't really have any of that West Nile effect. So the DNR did give out test kits this year. I don't know. Did you sign up to do any?
I actually
testing?
I didn't do that yet. I saw the email. I feel like I was perhaps in the hospital waiting for the baby to show up. But I did see that email. I got to circle back to it. I don't know if they're gone now, but
yeah, it's unfortunately I don't really pass by any of those particular locations unless I'm kind of out hunting. So we'll see. I'd like to do some testing in my area specifically, but that requires me to find birds in marginal habitat and then on top of that kill one.
Yeah.
So now we get a lot of woodcock down by us, but grouse they fluctuate big time.
Sure.
And I think this year, with the conditions being as dry as they were, it's going to play slight detriment. But I don't know that you get up into that grouse triangle, kind of Park Falls and Tomahawk, Rylander, that big woods in Wisconsin towards the east. I think it'd be just fine. Very similar to last year.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be, it's one of the, like, folks like myself and you, it's like, we're going anyways. Like I pay attention to the stuff just because I'm interested in it, but I'm not making my plans based on it for the most part. But I'll make micro adjustments. Like I'll be looking for my swamp edges and stuff. But I'm kind of always looking for that anyways. So I'll be out there. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I don't think that it's going to play a lot into my strategy this season unless it has to.
Yeah.
But again, if you're not paying attention to those things, you don't know to make those little micro adjustments either. So
correct.
Again, that's why I'm a geek about things. When I dive in all the way.
Yeah, me too.
I go so far to make sure I understand exactly what the bears I'm hunting, are eating in my area, and I make adjustments. But that's unfortunately I would already be out in Dakotas and probably Montana as well right now. But Wisconsin threw me a bear tag, so I will be chasing grouse on opener here in Wisconsin.
Good deal.
Yeah, I can still grouse hunt in the morning and bear hunt in the evening if I haven't filled my tag, which opens a couple days before the archery opener. So I'm glad I only get to do that a couple times a year. If I didn't run across so many damn bears in my woods up there, I really wouldn't even apply for a tag. But there's a little bit of a, my neighbors want me to help them out up there.
Yeah. You know what? I have seen more bears in the last month than I can remember in quite some time, which when I say that, I mean like 4 or 5, but you don't really see them a whole lot. And I think they're looking for food. Like I think they're covering more ground and stuff. So I've seen them drive, and I saw one down by the Namakagon Barrens. I saw one on Highway 2 west of Duluth in Minnesota. I saw another one. I was driving around near the Brule, and I saw one on the road there. And the most memorable bear I saw this year, I was riding my mountain bike a couple weeks ago, and I was on the mountain bike trails in Duluth, and I came flying around a corner, and I came face to face with a big black bear, Brian. It could not have been more than 10 to 15 yards in front of me. He was standing in the middle of the trail, never even flinched. I mean, I got good brakes on my mountain bike. I slammed on him, immediately stopped. I hopped off my bike, and I almost turned and ran, but I just started backing up slowly, and he never flinched. I could see his jaws going, I think he was, trying to win me and stuff. I think they're pretty used to people, but man, I ride my bike on those trails a lot, and I never that's the first time I've come face to face with a black bear, and I don't need to do that
You
again.
just kind of wander off.
He never moved. I backed up, kept backing up, and I got to a point where I was kind of going around the bend that I had just come around, and I got to a point where I felt like I could flip my bike around, and I hopped out and rode away, and that bear never moved.
Wow.
Yeah. And
wow.
You know what the funny thing is, too, is
pretty rare for a black bear. I mean, I've ran across a number of bears. I've had one bear bluff charge me.
Oh, yeah.
Had a couple of them stand on their hind legs. But, I mean, I'd say 90% of the bear encounters I've ever had, they ran off like deer.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. This guy wasn't moving. And again, he didn't move towards me or anything. But the funny thing is, I've been thinking about putting my GoPro on my bike helmet because there's a little attachment, and some of those those trails are just so cool. And I almost did it that day, and sure enough, I didn't, and had that encounter. But that would have been a good one.
Well, you can put that thing on 1,000 more times, and you'll never have.
It'll never happen again. No.
Oh man, that's crazy. Yeah, I've had one female bear bluff charge me a few years ago. Oof. And I was carrying. I tend to not go into that particular woods too often without a 44 mag, just because of the number of bears I see there.
Yeah.
And she had 4 cubs that season, and it was one of the years that was when I started carrying up there. And, it was the first and only time I've ever actually, had the hammer back on a bear.
Jeez.
She got about 15 yards and veered off and barked at the cubs, and they all took off.
Wow.
But yeah, it was, and she's off, 400-pound black bear, what I would consider a trophy bear, and not the kind of bear you want to go into a scrap with. So, ever since then I started carrying up there, but I had an experience that, did you scream at all? I mean,
I didn't, man. I mean, it's, like you're just basically acting on impulse at that time. Oh, yeah. I mean, I think I just probably was muttering under my breath, said holy shit, and just started backing up my bike. And I recall again, I got far enough away where I felt like I could, flip my bike around, and I did it. And then I was boogieing downhill. So I got out of there pretty quick. And then I was right above, there's Hawks Ridge, skyline is in Duluth. I was right above that. And I dropped onto that main gravel road, which, there's people and stuff on there all the time. And I didn't feel like I was in danger anymore, but then I just started riding my bike, and it was almost about a minute later, I felt this surge of adrenaline. I was super pumped up just from the intensity of being that close to that kind of animal. It was, I was riding my bike really fast.
Yeah, I could speak to that, not on a mountain bike before, but last fall, I was putting out it was last summer actually. I was putting out some trail cameras on our farm, and I had walked the edge of a cornfield down, and the corner wasn't planted all that well. And then as you got down maybe 30 yards, it had really been choked off and close to the field edge, and really didn't want to walk down in there. It was kind of thick. So I turned around, came back, and this looks like a good spot to put the trail camera. And I start messing around with the strap, looking down on the tree, and I hear the cornstalk break, and I look up, and 7 yards from me, I'm looking eye to eye at a 300-pound boar, and I was carrying again at that time. And before I even got my hand on my pistol, I've never screamed like this before in my life. I don't know. I literally checked my pants to make sure I didn't piss myself, but I swear I sounded just like a little schoolgirl. And before I could even get my hand on that gun and out, that bear had turned around and ran clear across a 35-acre cornfield. Wow. It sounded like a Mack truck going through it.
They make a lot of noise.
I had scared him so bad by screaming like a little girl. I mean, but after that experience, I was just shaking with so much adrenaline. Yep. Yeah. And it was unbelievable. It was the closest encounter I've ever had. And with a black bear, and with an animal that, could hurt you.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. It's wild.
That's why I was very thrilled to get a tag this year, because I just don't like those encounters. And I enjoy walking through the woods, and I won't even put my dogs on the ground in that woods.
Wow.
I've got I've got an active bait site right now. I think I have 7 or 8 bears maybe coming in. If I could really tell the difference between them, because there's no food.
Right.
There's no berry crop this year. Really, is what the big thing is, and I'm kind of interested to see how that's going to turn out later in the fall. As kind of some of the tag elders come and start blooming, and some of those berries come available, and some of the other stuff that's just normally around late in the fall. I'm kind of curious. I'm seeing some of it, but not as much as I normally do.
Yeah.
I haven't seen a raspberry in weeks.
Yeah, actually, we've got some pretty good patches around here, and I haven't really checked them yet. I'm kind of curious, but yeah, everything's going to be more limited this year, I think, for sure.
Yeah, so I guess we could hope for good bird numbers. That might mean put a few more in the vest then.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully they're moving. There's a lot of them, and they're moving around, and it'll be interesting to see if maybe they are real concentrated in certain areas. That's something I'm thinking about. And the other thing is, it's kind of a good tip for people to think about is think about areas that, like, I know Minnesota's is even more swampier than some areas in Wisconsin, but think about those areas that were maybe too wet to get into, that cut that's a winter logging cut that you normally can't get into. Well, a year like this, you might be able to hike into some of that stuff and get into some covers that don't get visited a lot in other years.
Yeah, I've got a few places that are like that where, you get to the end of the logging road and it's waist deep water sometimes all the way across, and the logging road keeps going, but you can't access it until it's frozen. So that's kind of interesting. I've got now that you say that, I'm gonna have to go check a couple spots out here. Good point.
Yep, check those maps, everybody.
How are those maps with that ANGAL? Do you have any?
Yes, I've used them for.
Can you personally make any quick recommendations on that for anybody?
Well, so basically the way she's got it now is, okay. So I got a couple tips for, especially if we're talking Wisconsin grouse hunting. Number one is Wisconsin DNR has what's called the flight tool. Have you ever used that, Brian? Absolutely. Yeah. So the flight.
That's where I started before I got Onyx. That's where I used to do all of my research.
Yes. Yeah. So the flight tool it's all of the aspen cuts on state and county land, as I understand it, state and county land that are, I think they do 5 to 20 years old. And then they also have, I believe it's like alder flats that they have marked on GIS, and they've got the shape. It's really nice because like this, you don't always see this where they actually have the cuts outlined in the shape files that you can overlay on the map. And so you can use the flight tool. The nice thing is,
in comparison to Minnesota or Wisconsin, for that kind of data, hands down, Wisconsin's got it.
Correct. Yes. And that's great because it's made available to everybody. And I use it in Onyx. Onyx is a paid service, but I love using it because it's everything, everything's in one spot, and Onyx will sort of take advantage of any information that they can get access to. And Wisconsin, of course, made this available to them. So they imported into their maps, and I use that a lot, man. And again, it's just an aspen cut. It doesn't mean you're going to walk in there and have the best hunt of your life, but what it does is it filters out the noise of looking at just a blank satellite imagery map. Like how do you weed through it all, right? So this gives you areas to focus on, and it gives you the more information you have about the forest type before you go there nothing's going to teach you like actually having your boots on the ground and getting in there. But in order to maximize your time on the ground and be efficient, it helps to filter out some of the places that you probably don't want to visit. So I use that a lot. And if folks have seen that or have used that, that's the best way to think about Anne's maps, Scout and Hunt, Northwind mapping. She will show you that and more, because what her maps generally are doing are giving you the age of the aspen stand, the size. Her maps are just the most detailed and you're getting the most information. And then not all states are like Wisconsin, where they give you that information. So other states, you can't get that information unless you use something like Scout and Hunt. So for grouse and woodcock hunters, and she's expanding. She's got a lot of maps for states outside of the grouse range with other information, crop data, and the stuff.
She's out of like Michigan, right?
She's in Wisconsin.
Oh, is she Wisconsin?
She's in northern Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yep. She spends time in Michigan too. She kind of back and forth, but if you're interested in that and you want to learn more about forest cover and you are keen on identifying aspen cuts and tree types and species and stuff, absolutely worth checking out for sure. I use it a lot.
Awesome. That's great to hear, man. I'm always looking for, especially, Wisconsin, again, so much data available for the average hunter, but in places like northern Minnesota, more data is needed. I want to actually do a UP trip one of these years, and there again, more data needed. So it really, and for me, I kind of look at things about, especially with hunting and kind of preparation with data and versus boots on the ground. And it's about stacking the odds. Yeah. You're never going to win. I mean, you can't, you can always win, but I mean, you can't guarantee you're going to win.
Correct.
So it's, how can you stack your odds to do better? And those little things help me. Yeah. And I know they help other people. So it's interesting to get your take on that.
Yeah. And it's exactly right. You've got limited time. I've got limited dog power. Like at the end of the day, I'm trying to take in as much information as I can to put my dogs in the best possible cover and give them a chance to find birds. And, hopefully we make that magical moment where they go on point and the bird flushes and I get a shot. I mean, that's what we're trying to do. And I'm trying to do that as efficiently and as often as I can.
Same, man. I can't, I confer. Yeah. Well, we've chatted long enough today. We'll have to do this again. And man. I'm going to have to try to make an effort to maybe share a grouse woods experience.
Yeah, dude, let's see if we can get out there. Yeah.
Yeah, I know your buddies with Mike, so I'd love to see if the three of us couldn't get together. I'd like to see his gray ghost run through the woods.
Yes, yeah, sounds like fun to me, man.
And you got setters, right?
I got two setters. Yep.
2 setters.
They're both out of Northwoods Bird Dogs in Minnesota, and they've got the same sire. Actually, they've got some differences, a lot of similarities, but I kind of stumbled into the setter. I didn't grow up always thinking I was going to have one. I kind of always thought short hair was the dog for me when I was younger, but I fell in with Jerry Coulter, the breeder, and he breeds dogs for grouse and woodcock hunting, and just I've kind of never looked back. I love them. They're great for what I do.
Yeah, my best friend, my good hunting buddy, he runs setters. I think I can't remember. He's got a Llewellyn.
Sure.
I don't know. Oh no. I don't even know what the line is. And then, I don't know. Do you know Jason Gooding at all? Going kennels.
Okay.
He's got a shooting line.
Sounds familiar. I don't know that.
I'm in line.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's over in Baldwin, Wisconsin. So he's pretty close to me. And, he's kind of become a friend. And, he's got a shooting line. Okay. The setters. It's pretty wild line, man. The one thing drawback for me with the setters, I love their temperament. And this is just a personal thing. I don't like dog hair. So,
you and a lot of people.
So that's always been a very, off-putting and the shooting line, very, very short. I actually was looking at one of those dogs about 6 months ago, and it was in one of his outdoor runs. And I asked his kid, is that a pointer over there? No, that's a setter. Yep. I mean, it was that short. That's of a coat.
My dogs are like that too. They, and I wasn't, I think that it did appeal to me when I was from the outside looking in, but a lot of the dogs out of Jerry's kennel and mine in particular, they've got short, tight coats. They don't have that long, feathery setter coat.
That's nice when you got cockleburs and everything else too.
Yeah, exactly. They still pick them up.
My buddy spends a lot of time, picking stuff out.
Yeah.
And I love them though. They are great temperament for family dogs, and they I think what a lot of people need today in a hunting dog, and what's most realistic is a dog that has an off switch. Yeah. And the setter breed really, I think, has a very, very good off switch in comparison to some of these other breeds. So I do love their temperament.
Yeah.
I wish I wasn't allergic to dog hair as bad.
Yeah.
My daughter got us into the short hairs. Actually, I kind of gave her an option. I said, I want a dog that I can grouse hunt with. So here's your options. And we just kind of settled in on it. I had no previous knowledge with the short hair line.
Yeah.
Had really no grudge against any other. And I have been pleased. I got my dogs out of bluegrass kennels up in northern Minnesota, kind of near Sabika. And Jim, I think, is finally going to wind down his kennel. He called me 2 weeks ago and offered me a pup. And I'm like
not quite
year already, about at least a year.
Yeah.
I got to get fully back into Wisconsin. I just got the pole barn built.
Nice.
And I built it in a fashion that I can hold some dogs. And then the next step is just got to get the house built, and we can kind of think about that, add another dog. But I don't know. I'm once you go bobwhite quail hunting, we'll talk. I'm kind of thinking I might want to put a pointer in the mix.
Sounds like a plan, man. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, you really should. I can urge you enough to try to get down to Kansas. They had some good conditions this year, and all word is that things are going to be good. And if you go down there, let me know.
Are you going down there?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I'm going to try to spend some time down there in December.
Okay. Cool.
Might go down for the opener, and then
Which
I
is
usually
like
go down
mid-November, right?
Yeah, I think it's the weekend before like Wisconsin opens up their gun hunt.
Okay.
Might even be opener of gun hunting, which again, if I can chase bob white quail or shoot whitetail with a rifle, I'm going to take bob white quail.
Yeah.
So, I got a stick and string to shoot my deer with and get that over with hopefully quickly enough.
Yeah.
And I got a bear hopefully too this fall. So, getting deer meat isn't going to be nearly as
that freezer full and go chase some quail, man.
Exactly. You're going to go down to Arizona one of these years?
That is on my list. I'm not the type to like get too crazy about like having to go do everything else. Like, of course I want to do it, but sure. I'm much more like, I like to try something and then really dive into it. So like, that's where I'm at with the Sharptailed Grouse, and doing the Western trip. So I'm all rough grouse for the most part, obviously around here, but I really love going out and hunting sharptails, and I like, as long as I get that hunt in every year, I'm happy. But I will slowly start to expand and do some of this other stuff.
Well, you got to, extend your season.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the big deal. We can get snowed out around here. Yep.
January was when I first started going to Kansas.
Sure.
The bob white quail season and pheasant go till the end of January.
Yeah.
And they run a 365 day a year license.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
So you go in end of January 1 year, you can go in the beginning of January the next.
Correct.
You still got a license.
Yeah, that's nice.
And so it was really nice. It was a benefit of going, but then you just start learning the land more and finding more opportunity and meeting people and I don't know. We were hunting a lot of public the first couple of years we went down, and then we get day access to some private land, and it was just such an immense difference.
Yeah.
That I just last season I went down in December, and I stayed a couple extra days and hunted public, and we killed quite a few birds and ran across a lot of coveys. And with a difference in 1 month time from the amount of pressure those birds had on them, they were still hanging on some of the public pieces. And when you go in January, it's if you get into an area that's been really pounded, it's very hard. It can be very hard to find decent numbers on public land, even on some of the weehaw stuff. So I'm trying to go earlier this year, and Kansas has kind of been my destination. But then it ends in the 31st of January too.
Yep.
And you've got states like Arizona and New Mexico that go into February. So that's been kind of attractive to me, and just trying to figure out how to not have to come home. So I've got a few things in the works. I'm maybe hoping to do a little guiding down in Kansas if I can get a couple of these things to go here. So
cool.
If that works, then I might make some money and then travel and extend down in New Mexico or Arizona this season. But I think this year it's probably going to be a little bit of a stretch.
Yeah,
we'll see. Got a lot of things in the works, man. For me, it's not necessarily that I got to go do it. It's about just having the opportunity to run the dogs as long as I can. Cause long term for me, it's really what I want to be doing as much as I can to make an income is, spend half the year running the dogs and the other half of the year fishing.
Yeah.
Cause I don't really like to ice fish.
Me either.
For the longest time, I'd travel down to Florida and because my folks are down there and I'd save all my fish and stuff. My ice shack never got out last year and I was happy. It was one of the best winters I had.
Sounds all right to me, man.
All righty, man. Well, I'm going to let you run. It's been a blast chatting, Nick, and we'll have to stay in touch and see what we can do to get together this fall.
Sounds good, buddy. I appreciate the time chatting with you on your podcast, and I really enjoyed it. Thanks for the opportunity, man.
Yeah, and everybody's got to go check out the Project Upland Podcast and soon to be the Birdshot Podcast.
Thanks, man.
Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of Amaazen Outdoors. First and foremost, join your local conservation effort. If you're willing to take something from the land, be willing to put something back. Second of all, support our podcast sponsors. They help make us keep this thing moving. So please support Uplnd Outfitters. Discount code Amaazen is going to get you 20% off those Relentless pants. They are awesome. That's all I'm going to say. Support Uplnd Outfitters. Finally, please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. It would really help me in my ratings. Also help keep this podcast moving along. Thank you again for listening to Amaazen Outdoors. Shoot straight and get out there in the woods or in the field.